All right, so we are group one. We're doing case study one, and that is anti-corruption campaigns in China and Saudi Arabia, what they look like, why they started, and who ordered them. Next slide, please. All right, so a little background information on China. The current president is Xi Jinping. He was born June 1953. He's estimated to be about 65 years old. Nobody knows for sure. He was the son of the deputy prime minister to Mao Zedong, and he's had a lot of government official, politics positions within the Chinese government. Since he came from a prime minister, so the son of a deputy prime minister family, he's had a large part in the government growing up. He's had some smaller positions, but his bigger and more recognizable ones are he was the vice president from 2008 to 2013, and then he's been the president of China since 2013. Since he comes from a family who is so reliable to Mao Zedong, he has a reputation for prudence and following the party line. And then the anti-corruption campaign was his very first initiative when he became president in 2013. That was his first big thing. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I just want to go a little bit more into Xi Jinping and how other people across the nation view him. And so this was a study I found from Pew Research Center, where they conducted a survey of the confidence levels in Xi Jinping and how much confidence you have in the Chinese president to do the right thing regarding world affairs. And as you can see, there's generally low confidence. Canada, US, UK, those three especially, they just have a lot higher, is leaning towards them not having confidence in Xi Jinping. So that's just a little bit more background on how you can get a perception of how other world leaders kind of view him. And that'll segue into why we believe his anti-corruption campaigns are a little bit questionable. Next slide, please.
So then just a little background on China and corruption. So I'm using the Corruption Perceptions Index for all of these numbers. And in 2008, so the most recent report that was released, China's CPI was 39 out of 100. China placed 87 out of 180 countries in 2018 on the CPI. But China's CPI was at its highest since 2013 with a score of 36. So that's when Xi Jinping became president. And so this was at its highest, and that's when he started the initiative, really. That was since, as I mentioned, that was his first big campaign, his first big project. And then just a few common forms of business corruption in China. You have bribery, political interference, facilitation payments, quanxi, which is a Chinese practice, which is just the giving of small gifts, banqueting, small favors that can add up to bigger things, and money laundering. Next slide, please. And this is just the chart of China CPI data. You can see it all the way from 2010 until 2018. And then right here, right, is 2013 when they were at their highest. This is the historical CPI data, and it's from tradingeconomies.com. Next slide, please.
So the overall effect of the Chinese anti-corruption campaign has been that so the number of county level and city level officials that have actually been arrested as a result of the campaign in the last 2 years, on an annual basis, that number has increased about 50% more than when it was before 2013. So they have been continually holding people accountable through these campaigns, and it also boosts the economy because they seize assets, and a lot of the money that these corrupted officials kind of sanctioned off and kept through money laundering. So keeping those or seizing those stolen assets really boosted the economy because there's so much money that was unaccounted for. And it also fosters more trust between the Chinese people and the government. For years, the Chinese people have not really trusted their government. They had every reason not to. And so this anti-corruption campaign was also a step in that direction, where people, for the first time in a long time in Chinese history, were actually kind of trustworthy between the government and trusted their officials. Next slide, please.
So then just some little background information on Saudi Arabia. The current king, or Salman, is Salman of Saudi Arabia, Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. He was born in December 1935, so that makes him about 83 years old. However, even though he is the king of Saudi Arabia, the one who is controlling the anti-corruption campaign is his son, Mohammed bin Salman, and we'll get to him just in the next slide or two. But the Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud has had a lot of government positions. His longest reigning one was he was the governor of the Riyadh province for 48 years. After that, he became the defense minister from 2011 to 2012. Then he was the crown prince from 2012 to 2015, and he's been the king/prime minister since 2015. Next slide, please. Okay, so Saudi Arabia's crown prince is the one who ordered the anti-corruption campaign and has been the driving force behind it. The crown prince Mohammed bin Salman was born August 31st, 1985, so he's 33 years old. He as well has had a lot of government positions. He was the advisor to governor of Riyadh, so his father was the governor, and he was the advisor from 2013 to 2015. He was the Minister of Defense since 2015. He's been the Deputy Crown Prince since 2015. He's been the second Deputy Prime Minister since 2015, and he's the President of the Council of Economic and Development Affairs since 2015. So obviously he has a lot of influence over the Saudi Arabian government. He's got a lot of control, and he's the one who ordered this anti-corruption campaign. Next slide, please. So just like I did with China, I just like to give a little bit of background information on Saudi Arabia and corruption. Once again, I'm using the same CPI chart from the same website. And in 2018, Saudi Arabia was the 58th least corrupt nation out of 175 nations that were on the list. From 2003 to 2018, it averaged at about 62.19 out of 175 nations. However, the country's all-time high was 80 out of 175 in 2008. Common forms of business corruption in Saudi Arabia are the abuse of power and functions, nepotism, the use of a middleman to do business, overlapping of business and politics, active and passive bribery, and facilitation payments and gifts. And if you just look to the side, to the right, we have a little cartoon that I found, and it's the National Anti-Corruption Commission stopping a thief to give back money that he dropped. So that's just a little, while it's satire, you can see kind of how the people think the government works in Saudi Arabia. Next slide, please. And then once again, just as I did for China, here's Saudi Arabia's CPI historical data from 2009 to 2018, once again from tradingeconomics.com. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so the Saudi Arabia's kind of motivation to run the corruption campaign. So experts say that they calculated that roughly 10% of all government spending was siphoned off by corruption each year from top levels to the bottom. And so King Salman kind of recognized that in order for the country to grow, they had to do something about this corruption because there's too much money. And it was really an economic issue where if they didn't do something about the corruption, the economy would collapse. And so King Salman also stressed that Saudi Arabia would continue its efforts to preserve integrity, combat corruption, empower law enforcement and other relevant state bodies so that they're able to effectively practice their role in preserving public funds. But so this is the official side of it. They're saying, oh, we're doing this to just to really clean the economy, but we'll go into in the later slides of what other people think is the real reason behind that. So next slide, please. So this is the 2017 to 2019 Saudi Arabian purge. So basically, during this time period, a number of prominent Saudi Arabian princes, government ministers, and business people were arrested in Saudi Arabia. It started on November 4th, 2017. And the following weeks after, there's an anti-corruption committee that was created by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And so throughout this duration, throughout this purge, as they're calling it, as many as 500 people were rounded up in the sweep, and Saudi Arabian banks froze more than 2,000 domestic accounts as part of the crackdown. And then in January of this year, the committee officially ended the purge. And so, as you can see, they really tackled the economic issue with freezing more than 2,000 domestic accounts and holding up to 500 people accountable. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so to kind of go into a little bit more details of the Saudi crackdown. So as I said, it started in November of 2017, and all the detainees were put into the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh. So it was a very nice luxury hotel. But while the hotel itself might have been really nice, the conditions there were reportedly not nearly as nice as the hotel itself. So over the course of the 3 months, as many as 500 were imprisoned, and many of them were subject to physical abuse and coercion by officials. So in the first 2 days, reportedly, at least 17 detainees were hospitalized for physical abuse, and one later died in custody for what appeared to be twisted and badly swollen body and other signs of abuse. So there was a lot of physical abuse done by the officials there. So the people aren't really sure what the exact motive behind it was. If it was just for a power grab, or if it was for economic purposes. One of the most prominent detainees was the businessman Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. And bin Talal is one of the 50th wealthiest people in the world, thanks to his ownership of Kingdom's Holdings. So he has assets of totaling over $18 billion, and which a lot of it comes from owning lots of shares in Citigroup, Twitter, and Lyft, among other companies. So he was detained for allegations of money laundering and embezzlement, but was then later freed after handing over some of his assets. Once he was released, he denied the media reports, saying that the government was seeking $6 million in compensation, and he was also very defensive, saying that there was not torture within the Ritz-Carlton, and he was quoted saying, "To me, they've been fair and honest. I've been honest with them. Saudi Arabia had corruption. There's no doubt about that. It's unfortunate that an anti-corruption person became mixed in the whole thing, which is a fact that I accept." So in total, Saudi Arabia reached settlements of more than $106 billion in settlements, according to the Attorney General. So from this corruption, they made well over $100 billion. So we can kind of question the motives behind what the actual reasoning behind this crackdown was by the government. And Jeremy's going to go into how these risks affect the business environment in both China and Saudi Arabia. So next slide. Yeah, and then that was the Prince Ali talking about that. So this is one of the richest men in Saudi Arabia, who's been very pro-government, as publicly a lot of the officials have to be, or they can face repercussions by imprisonment and other fines. Next slide.
All right, so I'm going to go over the risks of the campaigns on the business environment for both China and Saudi Arabia. I'm going to start here with China. They're definitely cracking down on this corruption. They have averaged over 50% more crackdowns than there was in previous campaigns. So over the past 6 years, an average of about 50 high-ranking officials were arrested per year. As I mentioned again, this is double the figure it was before. And foreign investors have a reason to be concerned here. Firms in China find that corruption can definitely divert some time from the normal work of employees just to satisfy government officials now. So this is wasting time for employees in companies, not giving out the product they need to, but more just satisfying government officials. This is also becoming more expensive for these companies because they're spending more time doing this and not getting the production out that they need. They're spending double the time they need to just to get out the usual production. Also, companies are fretting further because the inconsistencies of the regulations. An example given in an article by Jennings gave the example that when Chinese tightened their allowable level of sulfur imported in wine in 2014, some Australian shippers had their wine dumped out at where they were bringing them in at customs, but other areas where wine was coming in, they weren't getting checked. People were letting them come in with the higher level sulfur, and it was really almost unreliable of who got in, who didn't. So it almost seems like there still is bribery and stuff going on with these anti-corruption campaigns. And, most people are saying these laws are up to interpretation, which is really not good for companies and business within the Chinese government. The economy is booming still, so they are doing a great job. They are cracking down a lot more, but these inconsistencies make businesses and investors fret a little bit more. Not sure when they're going to get penalized, when they're not. It just, puts the gray lining out there that worries them. And overall, the corruption campaigns um, are just making everyone a little worried and making the business environment a little less direct. Next slide, please. So moving on to Saudi Arabia, a lot of this seems to me like it is personal because they have detained many people going on here. They have said that they really want to have the utmost transparency with everyone, and they want to do it with the utmost force as well. One of those statements seems to be very true, the other does not. Force definitely seems to be very accurate. They have detained multiple people. 17 actually were hospitalized due to abuse, and one was actually found dead, which is really just not good in terms of the look of the government and what they're doing with these anti-corruption campaigns. In addition with that, investors are getting nervous because with these detainees, they are giving up huge portions of their business, billions and billions of dollars just given to the crown of Saudi Arabia, which is terrible because it is tanking some of these businesses, these huge corporations, and sending a lot of their leaders into like a depression almost. So this really is kind of a huge black like X or red X on all these companies, and they don't know where their money is going. Investors are scared to invest because they don't know where exactly their money is going to end up going, or is it going to go to the crown, or is it actually going to go towards the business and making them successful? Also, with the transparency part of their comment, they said they were going to use the utmost force. They definitely did. It was bad in that way. But they were never transparent with what actually happened. They released these people from detention, but they never actually released any charges that they were brought up on, released if they were guilty or innocent, none of that stuff. So investors are terribly scared, and businesses are scared to even work a little bit in Saudi Arabia because of these things. And not knowing overall, it just seems like the government is shady and doing these things out of their own personal beliefs, not really with the business. So it is making the business environment very tense and definitely tanking it a little bit, making every investors and all businesses not want to as much do work with them. Go ahead, next slide.
So now I want to ask you guys a question, like just to keep in the back of your mind while I go over my slides. Is this really about corruption, or is this about power? So the oil and multi-billion-dollar investment companies that have flowing statuses of like monetarily are perfect for corruption practice. So the king Mohammed bin Salman, with the help of his father, is really what is really what questions whether he's doing it for the anti-corruption purpose, or is it just to have the power so everyone's under one rule. The drama has Saudi Arabia moving towards a more diverse economy rather than solely oil. So most of Saudi Arabia's money, which is known, comes from oil, but this practice is actually having the money come from different economies in Saudi Arabia. The future leaders are involved in this domestic purge. This is a corruption war that Mohammed Salman believes he must win. Prominent people are being put behind bars with corruption allegations and having their bank accounts frozen. Like they said previously, there's been about 200 people arrested and 1,700 frozen bank accounts.
So what's really going on, I guess, in Saudi Arabia is that, like I said before, Saudi officials claim that the effort is an attempt to clean up the economy and tackle corruption, but there are a lot of critics that think that there's something deeper going on. They think that it's a front to just gain money from the seized assets. Like Ibrahim said, they froze over 1,500 accounts. They have collected a lot of money, and they say that they're going to use this money to help the public interests, but really it's just a larger scandal to just keep this money for themselves and for the crown. And then also Mohammed bin Salman, he's very clearly focused on ensuring his pathway to the throne is unimpeded. Like Ibrahim said, it's all about power, And over the last 2 years, he's done one thing very effectively is just remove his rivals. And it just sends a message to everyone contesting him that if you go against him, he will make sure that he will have all the political issues, all the economic issues. He will just rain down on you. And so that's also a political risk that's involved for anyone competing against the crown because he just wants to make sure that he's able to really succeed into it.
So again, you want to keep this thought behind your head, like me and Ali both said. Is this really about corruption or is it about power? Now, first we talked about Saudi Arabia. Now I'm going to bring you guys to the China side. Um, the arrest that actually happened with the corruption in China do not have a public charge posted. So they said this before. There's they believe that the anti-corruption does not have to be explained. In other terms, um, you don't have to explain why the person has been arrested. You don't understand. You don't have to explain why the accounts have been frozen. So this raises eyebrows already. People consider this, obviously an abuse of power and an office for personal gain. They regard to them as a dictator, but it also you have to look at the one side of him doing his best in fighting for corruption. In regards to China, the anti-corruption campaign was started in 2012. It estimated that over 1.5 million people have been quote unquote disciplined. And the logic of this approach is simple and it warns others against taking part. Basically, just tries to keep other leaders from coming close to China or Saudi Arabia. They want to stay on the top. Is anti-corruption, is it working? So Mohammed bin Salman is following the same footsteps as China. It is proven to work well, meaning the whole abuse power and everything, and people are concerned about the welfare of the entire nation.
Hello everyone, my name is Fatmata. I will be talking about the corruption policy in China. The Chinese government has been taking many measures to deal with corruption. For example, one of the goals of many economic, administrative, and political reform that has been carried out in the recent years has been to prevent official corruption. The main countermeasure in China today is the punishment of corrupt officials. There are three kinds of punishment. The first one is the political punishment. This committee is given a great authority to make rules, investigate cases of corruption, and punish corrupt members by expelling them from the community party. The second one is the administrative punishment. This agency is given a great authority to make administrative rules, investigate cases of corruption, and impose administrative sanction on corrupt officials. The third one is the most important countermeasure in China today, which is the criminal punishment. Most forms of corruption are classified as serious crime in the Chinese criminal law. Even death penalty can be applied in some circumstances. The unfair competition law prohibits commercial burglaries, which is punishable by the economic and administrative, and serious offenses may be subject to the criminal investigation. The commercial burglaries include giving bribe for the purpose of selling or purchasing goods, and the fine range from 100,000 to twice of the amount. Twice of the fine, and illicit income is confiscated. In 2012, Bo Chile, he was arrested for embezzlement of 3.2 million US dollars, which is equivalent to 2.7 million in euros in bribe, and also in abuse of power. He currently serving a life in prison. Yang Zhongken was a former senior leader in the Communist Party in China and also member of the 17th Politburo Standing Committee. He was also the highest decision-making body, and in 2007 to 2012, he was the third most powerful politician in China. In 2014, he was charged with adultery, burglaries, and leaking state secret. In 2015, he was arrested. He was sentenced to life in prison. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys learn a lot from the corruption in China and in Saudi Arabia. Thank you so much, and I wish you guys a good summer. Thank you. Bye.